Good evening, everyone. Councillors, officers, members of the public, those that may be joining via the webcast, I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to this meeting of Cabinet being held in the Town Hall here at Maidstone today, Wednesday, the 25th of October, 2023. The usual matters of housekeeping. There are no planned fire drill tests this evening. Should we hear such a thing, please consider it to be real and await further instruction for evacuation from the Democratic Services Officer who is sat to my right-hand side. I'm also going to ask if anybody is planning on recording the meeting this evening. There is a nod that may well be the case, and I ask not to prevent you, but just so that others in the room are aware. And I'd like to also remind everybody that this meeting is being webcast and will be available for playback on the Council's YouTube channel as well. Mobile and telephonic devices to the usual silent mode, please, would be appreciated. And with that said, let's continue with the business of the evening. Agenda item 1, we have a single apology for absence this evening. Councillor Mrs. Claudine Russell sends her apologies. At item 2, the consideration of urgent items, we do have a single page of update which relates to item 13, and it's a modified note of the minute in the meeting that makes the reference to to Cabinet this evening. I think we've all had sight of it, but if anybody requires any additional time to digest that before we enter into that item, please do let me know. I see that we have a visiting member with us, and I'd invite them to the speaker's microphone. And are there any items that you would wish to speak to?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. I'd like to speak on 13, 17 and 18, if I may, please.
Your right is duly noted on 13, 17 and 18. There are no other visiting members with us. At item 4, may I inquire of both officers and members, are there any disclosures this evening? Councillor Cooper.
I have lobbied on item number 17.
Oh, we're not quite on lobbying yet. Disclosures first. Okay. No indications, therefore no disclosures noted. Now I'll proceed to agenda item 5, lobbying, and straight to you, Councillor Cooper.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman, I have been lobbied on item number 17.
Right, that is noted for the record. Agenda item 6, this is the moment where we consider if the whole meeting can be held in public or whether there's any reason to go into part 2. We do have some yellow pages attached to our agenda packs this evening. If when we get to that agenda item, there is the need to discuss the commercially confidential information contained, then I'll suggest that we move into part 2 arrangements at that stage. But I am hopeful that the substantive decision on that matter can be held in public. But please do bear that in mind if you wish to reference any of the commercial financial data that we would need to go into part 2. Is that to your satisfaction, members? Is that agreed? And so to the minutes of our last meeting held on the 20th of September 23. As I always say, these are circulated with the papers. I trust you've had time to peruse and check for accuracy. Are there any matters of accuracy anybody would like to raise? So with your agreement, I'll sign those as a true record. Is that agreed? I thank you. Item 8, there are no petitions before us this evening. So to item 9, questions from local residents to either myself or individual Cabinet members. I understand that we have one question this evening, and I'd like to invite that questioner to the speakers table to ask their question, and I believe this is to Councillor Paul Cooper.
Hi, With regards to the telecoms planning application, reference 23/501/215/TNOT56, which is for a telecoms mast outside of my son's school in Maidstone. I would ask Maidstone Borough Council to consider why the Chief Executive, the head teachers and the governors of Valley Invicta Academies Trust, which include Valley Park, Invicta Grammar and the Science and Technology Schools, were not made aware of the plans via the correct channels prior to approval.
Thank you very much. In short answer to the question, I'm not entirely sure why the governors and the head teachers weren't aware, but to give a little bit of context, the planning application reference that you mentioned this evening isn't specifically a planning application which was seeking permission. It was a prior notification by a telecommunications company that had sought to erect apparatus under national permitted development rights. Such proposals must be dealt with within 56 days, and these are publicised on the weekly list of planning applications and via a site notice or consultation letter. A site notice was published in the vicinity, but also a notice was served by way of a consultation letter to all adjoining properties and owners and occupiers. That included Invicta Grammar School, Valley Park School, and a number of relevant residential properties. The consultation letters were sent out on the 15th of March of this year. That was following the validation of the application, which came on the 10th of March. They gave a deadline for the 5th of April of this year for comments. However, the case officer who looked after this actually took into account all comments that were received from neighbouring properties up to and including the 19th of April of this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary question arising out of that answer, or the original question?
I do. Many 5G masts are being installed in and around Maidstone, and a number of these are situated close to schools and nurseries. The radiation from these masts is classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is part of the World Health Organization, as a Group 2B possible carcinogen. Is Maidstone Borough Council happy that infants and young children are chronically exposed to radio frequency radiation while they're at school or in a nursery, or does it think that a precautionary approach is needed to ensure that 5G masts are sited well away from these sensitive sites?
I think we should always take a precautionary approach. I must confess I am not aware of the latest research in this vicinity. However, what must be noted, we have very, very little power to decline such applications. Such guidance is provided on a national basis. So I would genuinely urge you to write to your local Member of Parliament, who is much more responsible for the planning rules than this council is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore, for your question. We're at agenda item 10, questions from members. There are no questions from members this evening. Similarly, at 11, there are no matters referred to Cabinet, or at 12, no matters arising from overview and scrutiny. So at 13, commencing on page 7, we have the consideration of the reference to this Cabinet by the HHE committee in regard to replacement refuse bins. So that's page 7 in the papers. Does anybody have any comments on this reference? So there's some history to this. Actually, quite rightly, I should start with the visiting member who's asked to speak on this, Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you. I thought I ought to just say a few words on this, as I think I initiated it through the through motion to council a few weeks back. Obviously, I think there is a general feeling that that the new policy is substantially better than the last policy. We had a long discussion at HHE, and I'm quite happy as was the rest of the committee, to hang on till January before another look at the policy is taking place. And I do hope that this cabinet agrees that that further review can happen in January once those figures are in from the waste team. That would be really good. I really want to see this policy tweaked and shaped in a way that makes it best for the council and for people.
Councillor Garden, did you want to say anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Councillor Jeffries, as you're aware, this was an operational decision taken on the 1st of October, which is under constant review. And as we speak, we are getting data in. We all agreed at the PAC meeting, Policy Advisory Committee meeting, that January would be the best date because we will have enough data by then. Maybe, hopefully, we have learned a few more lessons by then. And if anything crops up in the meantime, we certainly will address the problems as they appear, and we will not wait simply because there's a committee scheduled in January. I hope that reassures you.
So I think, I would simply add to that, although I think it's appropriate for a slightly more formal review into next year, once we have some data. This is actually an operational matter, and I think this cabinet would like to make it very clear to the head of service of the waste team that if further operational improvements to the policy are necessary, then they do not have to wait until January to do that. So if there are obvious further tweaks of improvement, it should be ongoing, and because it doesn't sit as a formal decision, it's operational, then it's quite in order that the waste team would be able to make those changes, and they would probably refer to the cabinet member as part of that process. But we don't have to wait just for the sake of it before the obvious right thing can be done in this instance. Are there any further comments? I don't think there are, but we will of course note that report will come forwards in the forward plan, and we will review things in a structured manner in January as well. I think that concludes us at that item. Items 14 and 15, serious service failures and written representations from members. There's no business to consider in that connection this evening. May I ask you to turn your attention, please, to agenda item 16. That's the forward plan. This sets out the items that will be coming to this cabinet in due course. Whether anybody needs to make it, there's one thing that I think needs to be added. There was a note in the minutes that we've asked for a update report on SIL, the community infrastructure levy, and the process for awarding those funds. I think we're anticipating that in January, and we would like to see that added into the work programme so that it's recorded. And with regard to the town centre strategy, we anticipate an update report in relation to that, so probably that will inform everybody of the current state of play and when we will be anticipating further consultation. Is there anything anybody else needs to raise for a forward plan? Pretty comprehensive as per the papers, so I'll ask colleagues, is that noted? Thank you. Agenda item 17, we would normally look to the chairman of overview and scrutiny to be present for this item, but I don't think we seem to have him with us this evening. This is where we make a formal response to the overview and scrutiny recommendations arising from their investigation of the water management cycle. I think the most prudent thing to do would be to go to Councillor Jeffries, who's asked to speak on this as visiting member, and then I'll open that up to Cabinet after that.
Thank you. obviously water management is close to my heart, and I know it's close to others' hearts as well. I just wanted to come here and reflect on the scrape itself, the action plan itself. There's a lot of work went into the to producing this plan, and whilst the response is really good in some places on some of these items, it does feel quite lackluster in other areas. For example, there's I think it's the fifth one. I wish they were numbered. Promotion of roof water from roof water separation from sewer systems piece. The response sort of says it's a bit too difficult, and suggests we should have got input from the water companies. I'm pretty certain this was a suggestion from the water companies. I mean, I sat in those meetings. I'm pretty certain that came through from them. I might be wrong, but it was certainly discussed with them. The next one on grey water just feels a bit, it's too difficult, and I think we really ought to be far more what's the word I'm looking for, belligerent to try and in our response. You know, this is a really important issue. We need to be doing everything we possibly can, and frankly, if the legislation doesn't let us do it, we need to be lobbying government to do so. The further recycling of water again comes across as too difficult. Number 9 around the SUDS, it says can be reviewed. Well, how about will be reviewed? Surely that's stronger and shows that we are being more proactive. And then finally, the 10th one, which is around the consultation with people like Southern Water. Well, I sat in planning last week when 110 houses were agreed for Sutton Valence, and the response from Southern Water was, yeah, we can cope. Well, we know they can't cope. So what are we doing to get a proper response that tells us something more than just the one-liner that they always give? Because we know they can't cope. Our river is full of sewage. So I just want us to be much stronger in the way that we are tackling these suggestions, these items, and the real issue that we are facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I particularly want to thank Councillor Jeffrey. So the majority of this scrape refers to my portfolio, although I know there's a huge amount of crossover with the Cabinet Member for Environmental Services. I just want to pick up very specifically the point that Councillor Jeffrey has made surrounding water companies being consulted. The water companies are consulted with every planning application. They have an opportunity to respond. I don't think it is for us to tell them that they can't cope if they tell us that they can. I don't know what more we can do to further engage with them beyond what we are doing, and I would genuinely welcome constructive feedback to that question. Likewise, going back to SUDS, that is something for whichever administration picks up the next local plan review. Certainly, that's something that's been picked up in this the local plan review that myself and Councillor Burton have looked after. I think saying that it may be picked up in the next LPR is perfectly legitimate. We can't guarantee, we can't bind our successors' hands. If I am the Cabinet Member at that point, I will certainly be sure to ensure that SUDS are reviewed where appropriate. Likewise, the comments about grey water and rainwater runoff. There are some things which are picked up in the design and sustainability DPD about runoff. When it comes to grey water, I think there is a huge amount of regulation already, which is from building regulations. And as it says here, and I concur with the officer's response, we don't have the expertise in-house, nor do we have the suite of evidence that would be necessary to create our own regulations. And frankly, even if we did, I'm not sure we would get them past a planning inspector. However, where there are practical improvements that we can make, we will pick up for our planning committee. I think beyond that, there's nothing more specific that I need to mention in here, other than to pick up those points that were made by Councillor Jeffrey. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So what I would like to further add in relation to the scrape, I'd particularly like to put a little bit of clarity to the first item in the scrape. There was a recommendation from Overview and Scrutiny that £100,000 should be made available to pursue feasibility studies for water cycle management issues. The response as printed indicates that there is already money set aside. I think what we need to be really clear about is that there is capital provision, very specifically for flood alleviation. That has been the case, has already successfully implemented a couple of schemes already. But it would be misleading of us to suggest that there is a spare 100,000 down the back of the sofa in addition to that to speculatively do feasibility work and the other raft of things. So I think it just needs that utter clarification. There's no spare money in the budget anywhere, but there certainly is a lump of capital that in collaboration with other partners, we should be working hard to deliver flood mitigation methods. And much of this falls within a business as usual type of approach. We are always looking for opportunities to do those things, and if something looks like it's got some legs, that capital is available to develop the work and to deliver the work. I think I want to also reiterate a point that Councillor Cooper has made, that some of the things asked for here actually sit within what are referred to as building regulations. These are hard and fast rules and regulations. If you are developing, you have to do it to this standard and in this way. And there is little benefit of this council developing a separate suite of policies that just duplicates that and repeats it. So, it's again, absolute business as usual. If you are making a sizable development, then you are not allowed to just put all the rainwater from the roofs into the sewer system. You have to have SUD systems in place for those developments, and the regulations are really very, very clear on that. But as a council, of course, we should look to see that delivered in every time that it is expected. The water companies is an interesting one, Councillor Jeffries. I think we all share what you're voicing there. The water companies are statutory consultees, and almost without failure, they will always say, of course it's okay to build this, we'll be able to provide the service. I think some of us think what they're saying is, of course we want to take another X times utility bills being paid to us every month, year in, year out. But they do have the statutory duty to provide those services, and they have their 5-year investment cycles. And we know that in places the networks have broken in this last year. I think it's probably true to say that some of those breakages would have happened whether you built another house or not, because there's a lot of Victorian infrastructure behind it and all the rest of it. So it's not all down to new development, but we must continue to lobby those utility companies at every opportunity to come to the table and to deliver the services that they are owed. So I think with the additional clarity on that first item, the recognition that building regulations do deliver a lot of what is asked for, and a recognition that what is spoken about here should be our daily bread and butter. And I think it's also worth mentioning, where we've looked to, promote rainwater harvesting for watering the garden or whatever else it is. That's exactly the kind of stuff we've been doing through our eco shop, engaging with the public as part of our climate change biodiversity action plan. It's exactly the kind of things that we are already doing. But in recognising that, members, are we happy to note the report and refer it back to overview and scrutiny? Is that agreed? Thank you. take this opportunity to welcome Councillor Perry, who had indicated that he may be running a little late, so he now joins the meeting. Councillor Perry, any disclosures? Any disclosures of lobbying?
No, Chairman, I haven't. I do apologise. A bus went straight by me. As a user of public transport these days, it's something you have to live with very occasionally. So I do apologise. Thank you.
Well, good to have you with us now, nonetheless. So Councillor Perry now joins the meeting. Can I take us, please, next to the next item of business, agenda item 18, Air Quality Action Plan. This commences at page 38 of the papers. Councillor Garton, do you want to say anything in relation to this to get us started? And then we'll come to the visiting member.
I suppose, Mr. Chairman, there's not much to add than what is already in the executive summary. The council declared an air quality management plan for Upper Stone Street in 2022, and we then went to public consultations. The outcome of the public consultation is more or less in front of us. We drew up a plan of 14 key items how to tackle this problem. It's a question of analysis. We have no infinite resources, and the targets should be available. That's how we derived at this table. Particularly important, although the table is not in order of importance, but particular importance should be drawn to item number 1 and 2. 2 is the no stopping zone in Upper Stone Street, of which I am particularly proud, since it was initially many moons ago, was my idea. However, unfortunately, due to COVID and the fluctuation in traffic flow during that period, we don't have any conclusive data whether we achieved as much or more as what we wanted to achieve. The other problem is that bus companies have been banned with their most polluting older vehicles in a lot of towns and cities all over the UK. And we are now facing the slightly older fleet being part of the Maidstone fleet, particularly with the national bus companies. And we seek that there's some, or we understand that there is some mileage to be had to enter consultation with bus companies and to address the pollution coming out of their tailpipes onto upgrade the fleets, or certainly adjust the timetables to avoid the most affected roads of Maidstone by the buses of older vintage.
Thank you. Can I turn next to Councillor Jeffries as visiting member?
Thank you. I suspect you know where I'm going to come from on this. I want something a bit stronger, clearly. I've been campaigning on air quality for decades, it feels like. Just looking at the plan itself, Councillor Garton's just been talking about the buses. I had a look. You can actually download which buses are in use on any route at any one particular time. There's a national database on the internet, and I downloaded lots of buses and found that Maidstone last year at one point had the dirtiest bus fleet in the country from Arriva. I only looked at Arriva's. So I think we've got a real problem locally. I cycle up that high street regularly. I see them sitting there idling. I get lungs full of fumes regularly on my bike. It's horrible, and it does kill people, as research has shown. I've just on a few specifics on the plan itself, things like the taxi policy. Is there anything else we can do through licensing? Anything we can enforce around the taxis? Taxis are a key form of public transport. We need them. They're a good resource. But if there's something we can do through licensing, that would be really helpful. some of the information campaigns, I'm not convinced are going to do a huge amount. I think people are aware of the problems. What they need is things to tackle them, such as the anti-idling campaign across the borough. And I note it is across the borough. I also note it's not on my road. I've got 3 schools on my road, and I've never seen anything on anti-idling there at all. Electric vehicles doesn't seem particularly fair. Those of you with electric vehicles, I think I've got one at the moment. I've got a hybrid. You know, they are expensive, and therefore, you know, why are we providing discounts for people who have got that extra money? It kind of feels a bit anti-equity. So overall, it feels like that there are some okay thoughts in here, but some of the actions really don't feel like they're going to make a huge amount of difference. And I think it would have been lovely to see some more specific actions and some better dates and key milestones within here to give us a sense that we are making a difference. I do worry that this isn't going to deliver the kind of improvements that Maidstone really needs. Thank you.
I'm going to come to Councillor Cooper, then Councillor Garton, but I would like to just respond upon that point you raise about electric vehicles and the preferential treatment with parking fees, for example. There is a very specific logic to that, dismissing hybrids because I don't think they achieve much personally, and they're not included in that policy. But it is recognised that a pure electric vehicle is more expensive. In this council making parking available free to those vehicles, somebody travelling into the town centre for work every day would make a considerable saving, which actually allows them to afford the electric vehicle. So it was a very positive, proactive policy to help those that cannot afford electric vehicles on face value to make an additional saving to bring forward that change and that improvement. So I think that's the point you are making. I will allow you very slightly, but not normally.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It does say residents rather than people coming in. I just wanted to point that out. So I assume it's the parking permit.
Well, I think you're splitting hairs there. But now that you understand the policy, perhaps you give that some further thought. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. I'm not going to bring up the subject of electric cars, but I'm going to bring up the exciting subject of buses, which was raised by both Councillors Garton and Jeffreys. It is with a huge amount of frustration that we are still grappling with Kent County Council to try to come to some sort of arrangement for the replacement of the long lost quality bus partnership. Both you and I, Mr. Chairman, have attended a number of meetings of the Quality Bus Partnership when it was in existence. And whilst sometimes that left a great amount of frustration, it was a useful forum to sit down with both the County Council and bus operators to discuss such things. And it was a great lobbying opportunity. The ageing fleet of buses which are used within the borough is of particular concern. And frankly, it makes a bit of a mockery of those who wish to use buses as an exemplar for low carbon, given that they are quite literally belching out the worst fumes in the borough. So I really want to see the Quality Bus Partnerships replacement come up to speed soon, so that we can lobby bus companies, so that we can get green technology, and not just about getting green technology, but about getting reliable bus services in place so that our residents can use them, and so that some of our less fortunate councillors can get to meetings on occasion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And turning to you, Councillor Garton.
Thank you. I would slightly refute Councillor Jeffrey's point that these policies make no difference. Had Councillor Jeffreys been in this chamber in 2016 when I was elected, the air quality management area was about tenfold. It was every trunk road going through Maidstone. So we now narrowed it down. Of course, we haven't completely abolished air quality management zones, but we narrowed it down to a very small fraction of what we had in less than 8 years. So although we are faced with problems of two-tier local government and our need to communicate with KCC and push our policies into the KCC highways schemes, we did achieve quite a lot, I think, in that way. It is not ideal, but it's as good as it gets. And as I said before, we have not infinite resources, and our targets need to be achievable. I think anti-idling, I have a completely different experience to Councillor Jeffries, because every public car park I go past, there's at least one car where there's a person sitting in there. In the summer, obviously, they do like to have their air conditioning. This time of the year, they like to have their heating. They're reading, they're charging their telephones, and the engines are idling. I think if we can clamp down on that, we would achieve a lot in terms of air quality locally, particularly in pedestrianised areas or close to pedestrianised areas. Lastly, let me quickly talk about taxis. The licensing committee has been, and I'm a member of the licensing committee, so I think I can speak for the licensing committee. We've been in long discussions with the trade about upgrading their fleet, what is feasible for them. And the taxi trade is very, very welcoming to new ideas, but the feedback we've had so far is particular not the Hackney, the other taxis, not the Hackneys, the ones you call the mini cabs. They do a lot of long distance work, and there is electric vehicles is not really technically feasible, logistically feasible for their work. They could not just simply do a Stansted run on a single charge and then be ready to pick up the next customer without having excessive waiting times to recharge the vehicle. So we've got to wait a little bit for the appropriate technology, but I can only assure this committee that the taxi trade and the licensing committee are working very, very close together.
I think it's slightly worse than that with the taxis, because if Maidstone is minded to put minimum standards on taxis, and I think licensing committee debated this endlessly, the consequence will be they'll go and license in a different borough where they don't have that standard. So we were cut off at the pass being able to make that effective. So we need to continue to work with the trade to encourage them. And ultimately, because I think it is perfectly reasonable to have an electric vehicle that will do the airport run and back quite comfortably, ultimately, I think the lower costs of motoring that come from electric vehicles in the longer term will be what drives it, and we'll continue to promote that and work with them. Anti-idling is an interesting one, particularly prevalent at school times, drop off and collection. We do see that. I certainly see that in my own ward. And I think there's much that we can do to work with schools to encourage people to do the right thing. If we turn into the anti-idling police, it's a bit like asking the parents not to park on the white zigzags by the crossing. You tend to just get direct abuse back. But collaboratively educating, feeding it into the children's understanding of things, I think is the way we need to go, is how it seems to me. Any further comments? Councillor Gardner, you minded to move per the papers?
I'm certainly minded to move per papers.
Moving to adopt the plan. A seconder, please. Councillor Cooper. Those in favour? Unanimous. That is therefore adopted. Thank you, members. And to keep us moving forwards, agenda item 19. Perhaps I could look in your direction, Councillor Perry, to just talk us through the headlines of the council tax reduction scheme, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Straight away, I'd like to just say we are recommending that we continue with the current banded scheme. It's subject to an inflation adjustment in line with the Department of Work and Pensions annual increase of welfare benefits. Table 1 on page 172 shows the bands and the maximum awards, which is 80%. That it covers the legacy payments and universal credit. The figures shown in column 2 are per month, just in case anybody wants to question that. But as mentioned, the only change we are proposing is to increase the amounts in the banded income grid in line with the inflation. I think it's fair to say that this council's reduction scheme was introduced in 2013, and in 2020 we had a major review, partly to cover the change over to universal credit. It's worked very, very well, I think, and we have annual reviews every year to ensure that it stays reasonably in line. The banded system that's been introduced is, in my view, more not only more transparent, it's more easy to understand. And I think from a claimant's perspective, it works extremely well. So again, we're not proposing any changes to that at the moment. I think it's fair to say that there is a balance here, or clearly, because if you have a scheme for taking a council tax reduction, reflecting that some residents do have real difficulties in paying, clearly this is funded by the general residents of the borough. So there is a balance to covering between the two. But I think in the current cost of living situation that we certainly find ourselves in, I think there's a reasonable balance here. If you look at the estimates on page 171 of the report, you can see the total cost. These look big figures, but of course they include KCC, Kent Fire and Rescue, and other bodies. And Maidstone's about 15% of those figures. So clearly there's an issue for us in our future budget, but I think we've allowed for this in our budget. Looking to the future is always difficult to say whether there could be further pressures on this. There had been in the past when the COVID came in, that certainly did increase some of the claims. But overall, I think it's a system that works very, very well. And I would like personally to move that the recommendations on page 168. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Garton, I think you wanted to speak, and then is that Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid afterwards? Yeah.
Subject to my following question, I certainly would like to second Councillor Perry on this. There are families who are suffering in Maidstone, financial hardship, and the situation, unfortunately, is not getting any better. So, yeah, this is a very worthwhile scheme. However, I do see that Mr. Mark Green is available online, and I would just like him to confirm something, just to make sure that we are comparing apples with apples and not apples with pears here. The table at page 172, Councillor Perry said these are monthly figures. I think what we've got on our website are weekly figures. So obviously we have to recalculate them to make them comparable. That's fine, multiplied by 4.28 or divided equally. The other question is, are these figures after tax and national insurance as advertised on the website?
Yeah, they are net figures.
Thank you. We've got Mr. Green online, but we also do have Mrs. Kent with us, who might be more appropriately placed this evening to answer, but we do have Mr. Green with us as well. Mrs. Kent, you want to go first?
One. Oh, thank you. Technology. So the grid on the website is, as you said, weekly at the moment. We'll change them so they're both the same. So all the figures are weekly on the website. These are monthly, and they're net of tax, national insurance, and any pension contributions. So this is the take-home pay that we have in the grid.
Thank you. I think that answers your questions. Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was really only to second Councillor Perry's proposal, but I do think this is a very worthwhile scheme, and I'm pleased that, you know, despite the pressures that we are facing as a council, that we have prioritised keeping this scheme going.
Yeah, I don't want to just talk for the sake of talking, but I do think this is something vitally important for the residents that need it most, and it is excellent. But I wish we could help more. And there are two other aspects of particular worry to me here. The first is there's that cohort of people who are the, I'm going to describe them in a stereotypical manner, of a working family with children perhaps that are just about managing, that are that far away from just about not managing. And I think we've got to keep a constant vigilance on that. And this scheme is one of the small bits of help that we can apply in those instances. And therein lies another thing we must keep an eye on to make sure that we can keep balancing the books and there is enough money to do this. So I think it's a really good thing we're doing in conjunction with all the other cost of living work that we're doing, the cost of living roadshows, trying to match people up with all of the schemes that are there, whether it be cheaper tariffs for utilities that they might not be aware of, and there's a myriad of other things, and working with our colleagues at county. But there is so much need in this area at the moment that we've got to just keep it front and centre in everything we're doing. The motion has been moved and seconded. Can I ask if you support that, members? Those in favour? That is then adopted. Thank you very much. Takes us to our last item of the evening. This concerns a purchase of a property, and this is in relation to this council's ambition to go back to having good old-fashioned council houses, affordable housing for local Maidstone people. So this is another move in assembling that first 1,000 houses in addition to all the others that are in that category already. It is split between items 20 and 21 on the agenda, as I referred earlier. So the confidential commercial stuff is in 21, but I'm sure if we don't need to refer to that, we can deal with this in open session. Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid, would you like to just lead us into this one, please?
Yeah, just by way of a brief introduction, and I will keep it brief. This is a scheme delivering much needed smaller houses for affordable rent and market rent. Planning permission is already in place. It's a shovel-ready scheme consisting of 13 new 2 and 3 bedroom houses, 6 for affordable rent and 7 for market rent. Has off-street parking. There is good mix of property, shapes, sizes with traditional masonry construction. What is particularly attractive is it is a turnkey ready deal. So we will purchase this property once it's been fully completed. Obviously, we will do a standard exchange of contracts with a deposit, and then the final balance of payments would be on completion. It gives net biodiversity gain. It certainly improves the street scene, and there is section 106 in place for education, healthcare, libraries and open spaces. So I think it is one of the most attractive schemes we've actually had come forward, and I would certainly like to move per the papers. Thank you.
Councillor Garton, is that seconding?
Indeed, Mr. Chairman, I would like to second that. And when this particular development came to the Policy Advisory Committee, it had cross-party support, was unanimously supported by all members. And I think the local ward member said this is the best thing for Tovel in a very long time.
It's a small step on our journey to that initial 1,000 houses, but every single one counts. And it's worth, I think, reiterating that when we say affordable, I think we truly mean affordable, because our definition is the local housing allowance. So if somebody couldn't afford to pay rent, it's what effectively the government make available to pay the rent, and the rents to be charged are within that amount. None of this 80% of local private market rent rates. It's genuinely affordable. A small step on the journey, unanimously is supported across the council. Moved, seconded. Those in favour, please. Unanimously agreed. That concludes our business for this evening. I'd like to thank you all for your attendance and participation, and I can confirm the meeting is closed at 17:20. Thank you.